Hello everyone, welcome to the number one sports show in the world. I'm Benjamin Kier, you're watching The Benjamin Kier Show. We've definitely had an interesting week, one that is usually relatively quiet in the sports world, but this year is different. There is more big money being committed this week in both the NFL and NBA. And in just the last hour, the Nets are expecting a massive departure from one of their own stars. And no, it's not Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is showing some commitment. He opted into his $37 million option with the Brooklyn Nets, but now Kevin Durant wants out. Before we get to that story, because I will cover it during my Kyrie segment, James Harden declined his $47 million option with the 76ers. And lastly, in the NBA headlines, Russell Westbrook is going to exercise his $47 million option with the Lakers. All of those headlines have dropped in the last week, some in the last couple minutes, and all of them have different context. Let's start with Kyrie Irving. Despite what you may think, Kyrie Irving was never going to sign with the Lakers for the $6 million mid-level exception. Yes, players take pay cuts all the time in all different kind of sports leagues. But I'll be the first broadcaster to admit that's steep. There are very few players in the NBA who would not accept a $36 million check and instead take $6 million. As a player, when you're trying to build generational wealth in the prime of your career, I'm pretty sure every agent, attorney, family member, lawyer, everybody around Kyrie would have advised him or did advise him against turning down $36 million in exchange for $6. That's literally a sixth of what he opts in for, which he ended up doing. Now, I'm well aware that Kyrie Irving has earned some big money during his time in the league. But that possibility seemed so unfathomable to me. He's staying in Brooklyn. He's not ready to shut it down yet. Kyrie is putting all of his chips into the center of the board, and it's all in for one more season in New York. Now, despite what people might think, Kyrie Irving could have tested the market for a long-term deal somewhere else. I know some of you may think or would like to think that there would have been no market for him. But quite frankly, you're wrong. There is a desperate franchise amongst 30 NBA teams who would have happily given Kyrie a max, a long-term deal, a fully guaranteed deal. Multiple teams would have given Kyrie the benefit of the doubt. Because whether you like it or not, when he's on the floor, he's one of the best players in the world. And that is simply undeniable. So as a fan, you can be mad about that fact, that other teams would have shown Kyrie the money. But there are a lot of teams who have been mediocre or have been downright awful for a really long time, who are begging to have a star, who are begging to stir excitement and sell tickets for their fans, who are pleading on their knees for relevancy. So even though he may not show it at times, Kyrie Irving opting in shows that he is somewhat committed to Brooklyn, somewhat committed to basketball, and to getting on the floor, and trying to get involved with what Brooklyn is trying to build. He still believes in the plan that they put together when he joined the team in 2019. But, and this is a massive but, Kevin Durant does not believe in that plan. Breaking news just moments ago, ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski dropped a true Woj bomb on Twitter. Brooklyn Nets general manager Sean Marks is working with Kevin Durant and his business manager today on finding a trade for the franchise star. Woj later added, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving had no contact with the franchise after Irving opted into his deal on Monday, and a sense of inevitability existed that Durant would eventually ask for a trade. This might go down as one of the craziest NBA offseasons ever, most certainly in my lifetime. So, what's the first thing you think of when you're planning a vacation? Location. Where does Kevin Durant want to go? According to Woj, Phoenix and Miami are amongst the two teams that Kevin Durant has on his wish list. But the Nets plan to move Durant where they can get the best possible deal. But with 4 years left on his contract, there's no shortage of teams willing to unload assets for Durant. What would you give for Kevin Durant? What would your sacrifice be to get one of the best players in basketball history? I'll tell you, more stars than you're probably willing to give up initially, and years of your future. I'm talking years of draft picks. Unless the Nets get multiple big-time stars, the Nets are going to ask for no less than 2 first-round picks. And in my head, I'm thinking, why wouldn't they ask for 3 or 5? You're talking about one of the biggest trades in NBA history. And Kevin Durant, it's not like he has a year or 2 years left. We're talking about 4 years in the prime of Kevin Durant's life. And you get to have him? I don't think anybody on any roster is safe. Selfishly and truthfully, I think the Miami Heat are the best landing spot for KD. And there's a reason he picked Phoenix and Miami. First of all, no income tax. But what does Miami separate itself in? Well, first, it's a beautiful city. We've got a lot to offer that other places don't geographically. We've got some very passionate fans. We are a big market team. We have a lot of respect for our stars and experience dealing with them. LeBron was here not too long ago. We have an elite head coach in Eric Spoelstra. We have Pat Riley in the front office, one of the greatest basketball minds ever. This is the place for Kevin Durant to come. Now, everybody's on the chopping block, in my opinion. Duncan, Tyler Hero, a lot of different people. Kyle Lowry is probably on the trading block at this point. And although I'd hate to see it, Jimmy Butler may very well be on the trading block. You're talking about Kevin Durant. Anything goes, and to be perfectly honest, we as fans cannot get mad at whatever ends up happening. Next up, though, James Harden. He chose not to exercise his $47 million option with the intention of agreeing to a more team-friendly deal with the 76ers. Now, this actually surprised me. Just a few years ago in 2019, James Harden seemed like one of, if not the, most unstoppable offensive force in basketball. This year, closing the season with the 76ers, he did not look like that James Harden. Harden did not look like the 2018 MVP that he is. He looked his age. If we're being honest, he looked during the playoffs like we were watching a 32-year-old James Harden. James Harden is showing amazing self-awareness right now. I'll be the first one to commend him for it. He knows that he is not what he once was. I commend James Harden in this situation. He understands that his best days of individual basketball are probably behind him. He's still competitive. He still wants to win a title, but he knows it's going to take a lot more than just himself to get the 49ers to the promised land. He knows in today's NBA, to get great players who can help take you to the promised land, you're going to need a lot of flexibility as a front office, and you're going to need to deal with a lot of different components. They need flexibility in the cap space. So he's not able to carry a team to the finals by himself. Even in his best days, he wasn't. All I'm saying is that his abilities have diminished. His physique is not the same. That doesn't mean he's washed. He's not as agile. He's not as quick. It doesn't mean he's washed. I'm just trying to break down the situation. Lastly, Russell Westbrook. There was not a doubt in my mind or any competent mind in basketball that Westbrook was going to exercise his $47 million option. Russell Westbrook is another former MVP. For many years in OKC, he was the team. As hated as he was by opposing fans, it was just him. He carried Oklahoma on his back before he left. Although unbelievably talented, Westbrook's style of play was never going to work with LeBron and the Lakers. No chance. If you look at the ball usage statistics, or better yet, forget the stats for now. If you watch Russell Westbrook's career, he needs the ball in his hands. He's the point guard. He's the facilitator. He's the scorer. The game goes through him. LeBron James is a small forward. But it's no secret that LeBron James is the most elite passer of the basketball since Magic Johnson. He plays like a point guard. He's even been criticized for this. LeBron has always been pass first. He looks like a massive point guard. He can take a shot. But he's the distributor naturally. He's the quarterback. The game goes through LeBron. Do you see where I'm going with this? Do you see where the problem lies? I just talked about 2 excellent players across NBA history who were each the guy on their respective teams, who have the ball in their hands constantly, who have never played off the ball at any point in their careers. And they join the same team. Yes, that could be problematic. Yes, that could be a headache when game planning and picking roles for guys who have never been told that they weren't the best option on their team. So if you're thinking, Ben, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're too young. You haven't watched basketball. That's not what I'm seeing. Well, now I'm going to hit you with a stat. All-time usage percentage leaders in the NBA. These are guys from across history who rank as the highest in terms of having the ball in their hands during the game. I'm only going to read you the first 5 because that's all I need to prove my point. Number 1, no surprise here, Michael Jordan. Number 2, Russell Westbrook, 32.12%. 3, the late Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. 4, Allen Iverson, also Hall of Famer. 5, take a guess. LeBron James, 31.58%. How in the world would you pair these two who have the highest usage percentage rates players in history and expect it to work? In what world? Do you think Russell Westbrook is going to start playing off ball? Because I'm not taking the ball out of LeBron James' hands. You are insane if you think I'm taking the ball away from one of the greatest, if not the greatest player of all time. So if Russell's not playing off ball, and he's probably not willing to come off the bench, and I'm not taking the ball away from LeBron James, I'm stuck. I'm in quicksand right now. As a team, I have very few options. That's why moving Westbrook seemed like a solution. Now, because the $47 million option is attached to his deal, that's practically impossible. You're asking another franchise to inherit one of the worst contracts in basketball right now. And you won't get to do that without sacrificing first-round picks. Because it would probably take more than just one first-round pick in addition to Westbrook to lure a team into a trade. Based on the looks of things now, the Lakers and the new coach, Darvin Ham, seem to be holding on to Westbrook. They don't plan on moving him, which is probably the best thing they can do right now. It's unrealistic that any team, even the worst ones, would inherit a Westbrook contract without multiple first-round picks attached in that deal. And I'm not sure if the Lakers are willing to sacrifice their future to win in the present. I don't think they are. I don't think Jeannie Bush is. Another component to all of this, nothing, and I mean nothing, is guaranteed. Not even LeBron anymore. Especially not when he's hopping on the shop during the offseason talking about how he'd love to play with a guy like Stephen Curry and how he'd love to share a locker room with a high-intensity teammate like Draymond Green. Hey, those two just won a championship. One of them won a finals MVP. It's another contending team within the same state, and he's talking about joining them. What world are we living in? The Lakers aren't oblivious. They know how LeBron rolls. If he was willing to leave his hometown after he won a championship to come to you and deny a supermax from them, yeah, I get he makes a lot of money in LA, but he doesn't mind leaving you later on for a better roster or a better situation. The Lakers know that, so they're not putting their eggs in one basket. They are not moving Russell Westbrook. Washington Commanders wide receiver Terry McLaurin is signing a 3-year extension worth up to $71 million in new money. The deal places him amongst the NFL's 5 highest paid wide receivers. So, Commanders fans have some positive headlines to talk about and enjoy in the midst of an absolute firestorm that is the Washington Commanders franchise right now. But that court battle with Dan Snyder is not the topic of today's show or story. What we want to discuss and really dig into is the value of Terry McLaurin in Washington. We're going strictly from a football standpoint today. Terry McLaurin is the best player on the offensive side of the ball for the Washington Commanders. His skill and his talent are unmatched, and he's considered elite even when we're talking about regular wide receivers in general. It's especially true when we compare him to the rest of the locker room in Washington on that 53-man roster. Of course, Chase Young dominates the field on the defensive side of the ball, and prior to the upcoming season, he was the most important player on the Commanders roster. Why is he no longer the most important player on the roster? Because remember who's there now. I believe Carson Wentz has taken that title. No, do not clickbait this. Do not get my words twisted. Chase Young is the best player on the Washington Commanders. To me, if I'm Washington, he is the cornerstone of my franchise. Carson Wentz is not better, but he is more important. Whether or not Carson Wentz can find a way to succeed is a more important factor for the Washington Commanders' recipe for success than Chase Young's dominance. That's not a knock on Chase Young, by the way. It's actually a compliment. His greatness is so consistent game in and game out that it's practically expected of him at this point. To me, Carson Wentz looking like the Carson Wentz that made Philadelphia fall in love with him during that Super Bowl season is far more important as a key to the puzzle than anything else that's happening in Washington football-wise. Back to Terry. Terry McLaurin deserved every bit of that money. Just a few weeks ago, I went on a cap space rant, one that might go down all time as one of my most passionate takes. I feel that most owners who aren't as competitive or who don't have a fire in their belly to win use cap space as an excuse. If you want to hear more about that, click on the top right banner that's in the corner of your screen right now. That episode is now linked. But if you already watched it and you're a loyal subscriber to the show, you know what my take is. You can do a lot more with cap space than NFL owners tend to let on. The Commanders in today's wide receiver market aren't making an awful long-term deal. McLaurin is worth every penny of that contract right now. And even if he declines in performance, which I don't think he will, the deal's only 3 years. Worst case scenario, you can move off him after that. Some of you are probably thinking, Ben, why is McLaurin so valuable? And the simplest way of phrasing this, and my fantasy football fans know this, Terry McLaurin is matchup proof. It doesn't matter who his quarterback is, or what his defense is, who he's lining up against that week, or what DB he's going one-on-one with, battling it out during the game. Terry McLaurin will show up and out. We have conversations about players all the time, in other sports too. We were just talking about one of them. Man, what would it be like if so-and-so was healthy all year long? What would it be like if so-and-so was consistent? The Washington Commanders are lucky enough to have a luxury that some NFL teams don't have. The Commanders have a star on offense and defense who is not only great, but is consistently great. There are no stretches of mediocrity or bad play or injuries. Chase Young and Terry McLaurin, although on opposite sides of the ball, form a unit that is consistency. In a 17-week NFL season, that's important. Those mid-year matchups, those games late in the season when guys are banged up and not giving it their all, those are very important to a team's success and whether or not they'll end up in the playoff picture. Ultimately, Washington hasn't had a good enough roster overall to be in a great playoff seed or a run, but they have guys within the franchise who are built perfectly for that type of situation. Terry is one of them. And it's not because of who's under center either. In his first 32 NFL games, Terry McLaurin has played with 10 different quarterbacks. 10. For the record, none of those quarterbacks were top 15 or top 10 guys. Washington has not been graced with great quarterback play while Terry's been on the roster. It has been a revolving door while McLaurin has been a star for the Commanders. He himself is a vertical star. He makes amazing, unbelievable contested catches that remind you of the best days of DeAndre Hopkins when he's totally healthy. He's not afraid to try and outwill a defensive back on a route to make a catch. He's not afraid of contact. He's going to be diving and clawing for that ball if need be. This is even more impressive. In just 3 seasons, he's already mastered over 3,000 receiving yards. One of those 1,000-yard seasons actually came in a year where he had 6 different quarterbacks under center. That was last year. With the guys he's had at quarterback, yeah, I'm going to pay him $71 million. He's the only thing that has worked in my offense in the last 3 years. Terry McLaurin paired with a solid running back and Antonio Gibson, who could find his footing this season, and a potentially above-average Carson Wentz is a good core for a team that hasn't had a lot to be excited about in recent years. But that's the key. Terry McLaurin is going to be great. Chase Young is going to be great. But can Carson Wentz step up to the plate and lead the Washington Commanders? The answer to that question decides the fate of the Washington Commanders this season. Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury seems like a fleeting fight right now. I do not think it's going to happen. Jake Paul took to social media, as he normally does, to present a very valid point. For context, he's in New York right now for what should have been the Madison Square Garden press conference with Tommy Fury for the August 6th fight. Jake feels that the Furies are trying to manipulate the situation to force him into fighting in the United Kingdom. Both Tyson Fury and his father are prohibited from entering the United States. But they want a piece of the action. They want Tommy to be the A side of the deal. And they want the fight to take place in their home, which is unfair. But Jake, as always, he says he's all in. He'll do it. He'll fight in the UK. He'll agree to keep the same date and keep the same purse for Tommy. But he wants $15 million from the Fury family. And for everybody on the internet, I read these comments yesterday, who's saying that's outrageous, that he's not worth that. You're not keeping up with the times. You don't read Forbes. In the year where he fought 3 times, Jake Paul earned $45 million in 2021. Forbes published that in their 2021 earnings post. He was one of the highest paid boxers in the world. A side note, for those of you who don't know, there have been plenty of celebrities throughout time who have said that the Forbes estimate is wrong. They've said that it's actually less than what they make. They make more than what Forbes is reporting. And I don't think that all of those celebrities or athletes or personalities are lying or trying to show off their wealth. They already have plenty of attention and money. I'm sure that Forbes doesn't have all the numbers. They're probably underestimating. But just for argument's sake, let's say it was $45 million in 2021. $45 million divided by 3 fights, that comes out to $15 million. It's never been my thing, math, but Jake's math checks out. Truthfully, Jake Paul could have asked for more, and it would have been acceptable. Jake Paul's worth right now is more than it's ever been. And he's worth especially more to the Fury family because of what he can do for Tommy Fury's career. Tommy won't get this chance again. If there's one thing that Jake Paul does exceptionally well throughout his career, even when he was 17 years old, it's putting the ball on the other team's side of the court. Oh, you don't like the situation? You don't like me? Well, here's your way out. This time, he's saying, pay me. Jake Paul is taking a line out of Jerry Maguire's book, and he is literally announcing to the world, show me the money. By the way, you can call me Mystic Mac because I predict these things. I said on my last episode that Tommy Fury was still very hesitant to fight Jake Paul. I said that. This show seems to get predictions right quite often. And that there would be another bump in the road on the way to this pay-per-view in August. So, worst case scenario, which is actually best case scenario for Jake, Tommy prevents this bout from happening once again. Jake gets fed up. He cancels the event altogether. And he waits for Nate Diaz at the end of 2022, maybe early 2023. If you don't like what I'm saying, because you consider yourself a real fight fan, an authentic fight fan, I'm sorry. But it's becoming more and more true every day. Jake Paul will fight Nate Diaz. I'm not sure if it's in the octagon. I'm not sure if it's in boxing. I'm not sure if the UFC will co-promote it and Dana White will end up becoming friends with Jake. But it certainly will happen. And it's going down in 2022 or early 2023. Another scenario. If Tommy Fury doesn't work out and Nate Diaz doesn't come to fruition either, former boxing champ Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and Iron Mike Tyson are on the table. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., former Mexican American champ, had a very public feud with Jake Paul at the end of 2021. And he said he would step into the ring with him and he'd knock him out. And just weeks ago, Mike Tyson was on Jimmy Kimmel and he said he'd love to fight Jake Paul in an exhibition. And this part, if you watch the video, you love to see it. Jake Paul and Mike Tyson are very respectful of each other. They appreciate what each has done for the sport of boxing. And Jake immediately responded, saying that he'd love and appreciate the opportunity to step into the ring with Mike Tyson. If nothing aligns for Jake Paul, a late 2022 exhibition fight with Mike Tyson is not a bad option. That'll do great pay-per-view numbers, and it'll get him in the ring at least once in 2022. But yeah, as a fan, as a broadcaster, I do not like what Tommy Fury's about. I don't like the kind of business he's conducting. He's not going about this the right way, and it will catch up with him. Currently, as I record and release this episode on the afternoon of June 30th, 2022, Deshaun Watson's disciplinary hearing before Judge Sue Robinson has been extended to a third day today. No conclusion has been released yet. I assume we'll have an answer on this by next week's show, but this situation is unprecedented. And I wouldn't be surprised if this result is delayed even further than that because they have a lot of material to evaluate. Don't blame them one bit. When a decision is made on Deshaun Watson's future in the NFL, you will hear my raw, unfiltered reaction on this show and on this show only. Until then, I will not speak on the matter. And some better news, I do want to end on a positive note. Quick shout out to the Inter Miami CF Academy. All their groups finished at the top of their pack, earning the number one spot in their respective MLS Next divisions. Those guys deserve all their flowers. They're all young. They're all excited. They all work really hard for this moment. And some of our guys have just wrapped up international tournaments and their playoff runs. But our U15 unit is still in the mix. The Inter Miami CF U15 squad takes on the LA Galaxy in the MLS Next Cup semifinals today at 5 p.m. Central Time. This is definitely big time. It's at the Toyota Soccer Stadium in Frisco, Texas. I was interviewing these guys last week. They seem so excited, and I really do wish them the best of luck. This is very important. It has championship implications because whoever wins at 5 p.m. advances to the final for a chance to win it all. So this Thursday, we're wishing our guys the best of luck. I hope we've got some good news to report to you guys by next Thursday. You probably can watch this on MLSsoccer.com. There should be a link. I'm sure they'll live stream it. But if not, Inter Miami CF Academy on Instagram and on Twitter, they'll have the updates there for you. Now, with that said, a jam-packed episode. Comment, like, subscribe. You know the drill. It helps the algorithm connect us with other sports fans. It helps us grow the platform. It's an exciting time. Our last episode was our best episode yet. I do want to share this truthfully. Had the most views, had the most likes. It also had the highest watch time and retention. So I'm definitely proud of that because not only are we putting out content, but clearly you guys are enjoying the debates. You're listening longer and longer and longer. And that also helps me improve my skill as a sports broadcaster, which I hope I get to do for years to come. Until then, I'm Benjamin Cure. You're watching The Benjamin Cure Show. I'll see you guys next week.